Hello. This is going to be an unscripted, a little more impromptu, but I think you should still enjoy. This is just a greeting that, first of all, I'd like to wish a Merry Christmas to all who celebrate, and a Happy Saturday to all those who don't, and a good New Year to all. So I'd like to take this time for just a quick reading of a text and also do an off-the-cuff look into some of the historical, philosophical background and influences. And with today, December 25th, being Christmas, we are going to do this for the first chapter of the Gospel according to St. John. I think you'll really enjoy it, whether this happens to be a story you believe or not. It's something that's very powerful and has impacted many for a long time. And I think that understanding why that is can help us to understand each other as well. So this begins with the prologue, is what we'll be reading today. Christ, the eternal Word. In the beginning, the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, the word is used in English for the Greek word logos, which you may recognize, of course, from the name of this podcast, mythos and logos, as meaning or a pattern of reality. It was first used by the oldest Greek philosopher we really have any writings of, Heraclitus. He used logos to refer to the pattern of changes and cycles, harmonies and flows that he saw in the world. And John is very clearly in this Greek tradition here. Roughly 100 years before this gospel was written, the Greek Jewish philosopher Philo was the first to try and harmonize the Greek philosophical logos with the word spoken by God of creation in the beginning of Genesis. And this is absolutely the tradition, that synergy of the Greek and Jewish that John is placing himself in at the beginning of this, talking about that eternal logos or word. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. The Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life was brought to everyone. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. God sent a man, John the Baptist, to tell about this light so that everyone might believe because of his testimony. John himself was not the light. He was simply a witness to tell about the light. The one who is the true light, who gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. I find it very interesting that the text mentions how John specifically had to tell people, no, he was not the light. He was not the Messiah, to use the more Jewish-oriented term, whereas John is in a little more of this Greek tradition. And why would that need clarification? Well, the Second Temple period in Judaism, especially under Roman control in Judea, was a very tumultuous time, and there were a lot of people claiming to be messiahs, claiming to be the chosen one who would lead Israel out of its captivity. In the decades before Christ, there were a number of these messiahs that actually had led to violent revolutionary attempts, which can also explain a little bit of why later in the gospel accounts, many of the Pharisees and rulers were very concerned about Jesus, fearing that he might be another one of these revolutionary type messiah. So John is making it very clear that he, and this is John the Baptist we're speaking of here, is making it clear and made it clear from the beginning of his ministry that he wasn't the Messiah. He was not going to be another one of these revolutionary leaders. But John also has an embodiment of this very Christian sense of humility, which becomes very important, as we'll see in our next episode on St. Francis of Assisi as well. Humility being that Christian virtue, that John is very humble, saying, no, I'm just here to guide you and let you know that the light is coming. Anyway, about that light. He came into the world he created, but the world didn't recognize him. He came to his own people, and even they rejected him. But to all who believed him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. They are reborn, not with a physical birth resulting from human passion or plan, but a birth that comes from God. Again, we can see echoes of the entire gospel story being laid out in this very first chapter. John, the gospel writer, again, is very aware that this is an introduction to an entire work. So the Word became human and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. That's why we're sharing this on Christmas. John, the Baptist, testified about him when he shouted to the crowds, "This is the one I was talking about when I said, 'Someone is coming after me who is far greater than I am, for he existed long before me.'" We see later on in the Gospels as well connections drawing Christ back to Old Testament stories, very much within that tradition that's existing. And that's what happens in this very next verse. "From his abundance we have all received one gracious blessing after another. For the law was given through Moses," that being the first gracious blessing, "but God's unfailing love and faithfulness came through Jesus Christ." The second blessing, blessings upon blessings. "No one has ever seen God, but the unique one who is himself God is near to the Father's heart. He has revealed God to us." And with that prologue, we can understand exactly what John's gospel, at least, has as the goal. The idea that anyone, regardless of whether they're in this Jewish tradition, this Greek tradition, or somewhere in between, as much of the Jewish world was at the time, and much of the Greek world as well, that it had some exposure to Judaism at the time. The idea that in seeking to know the Creator, it can be done through one person. And it's very radical, of course, but I think this gives us a great idea and a look into the history of the time, the spiritual, philosophical, religious context, the blessing upon blessing, grace and love upon the law, not one superseding the other, but fulfilling the other in the gospel writer's John vision. And it gives us a very strong look into the mind of the words of those who wrote this down, because Jesus himself didn't write the Bible, of course. And it's extra fascinating to just see how those who knew him experienced that. I'd like to wish you all the best. Thank you very much, patrons who are seeing this year, and for everyone else who will see this a year to come. Don't worry, these are for everyone. But I would like to just thank you very much for your continued support of the channel. I wish you all the best. To all who celebrate, a Merry Christmas.